real shit. key differences between this and other Mars rovers over the years? That's Sid Haines' question.
Yeah, good question. I just have time to name a few. But one of the differences from the previous iteration of the rover, the Curiosity rover that's now at Gale Crater, is the wheels. So these guys, we learned that pointy rocks on Mars destroy wheels. And so wising up to this advice, we have beefed up the wheels on this rover to give them an extended lifetime, even if we encounter, really sharp, pointy rocks. There's no AAA on Mars. If you bust your tire, there's no tow truck, right? So we got to make sure that our wheels endure the entire mission. Another key difference you're going to hear about shortly, and that's we have an in-situ resource utilization experiment called MOXIE that you'll hear about that takes carbon dioxide and turns it into oxygen, but more on that in the next segment.
All right, well, I know that you are a very...
Okay, we are live on the stream. Welcome back, party people, to another house party live. Thanks for joining us, and special thanks to our guest Kevin Owocki, who's joining us this week. As usual, first we're gonna hit some DAOhaus business this week. It's launch week over here. Version 2 is officially live. Does somebody else want to pick up exactly what that means? Because I'm just going to say, go read the newsletter. It's all in there. Yeah, and it's also, the end message is it's live. So just go to DAOhaus.club and play with it, because it's there, including the new .club, which is looking great. And yeah, go pimp your DAO. I said just you can pimp your DAO with what is Exhibit on Cameo?
Going on,
and we're getting a lot of great feedback already from people getting on there in our discourse. So if you do hit a bug, which is definitely possible, hit us up, let us know. We actually reward people for any kind of feedback too, so that would be awesome.
Kick-ass. That's more or less that part of it. So let's okay. Cool. Sorry, checking the audio. There was no audio from the chat reported, so already people helping us out here. Cool. That's it for updates. Let's talk to Kevin about things.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining to talk about stuff. Yeah. So I guess most people probably know you as the sort of founder / philosopher king behind Gitcoin, but past that, I'll let you take it in terms of the, kind of how you find yourself here in the crazy Web3 ether, I should say.
In the ether. Hey. I've always wanted to do that. It seemed like you guys were the right audience for that. I'm very excited to be here. I haven't ever been to a house party before. I don't know. It's been a while since I've hung out with really anyone because of the pandemic. But yeah, I mean, what are y'all interested in chatting about? And I don't have a presentation prepared. What should we jam on?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely just a open jam. So
just a hangout.
The first thing is kind of, we can jump into the DAO stuff, but
right.
Yeah, I guess
everyone knows what like Gitcoin is because it's such a huge thing in the space. It's pretty awesome. what
we're
is over,
big fish in a small pond. I would say maybe.
yeah, yeah, maybe one of the biggest fish. But even over the last few years, it's been awesome just watching how it's grown with grants and quadratic stuff. It's really cool to see, and your community is huge. Yeah,
For
like
sure.
I don't know, like one thing I like hearing from people is kind of like their first steps even into Ethereum. Like, were you around in the early days, or was it something that you were building something and you saw the potential using Ethereum and shifted,
Right.
or what?
For sure. Yeah. My origin story in superhero terms with Ethereum, I guess. I also just switched from I like to do key binding speaking, but since I guess we're going to be talking a lot, I'll switch to voice activity. Let me know if it bleeds any audio. I got into Ethereum around 2015. My friend Piper Merriam, who now works at the Ethereum Foundation running their Python team, had told me about Ethereum and just how excited he was about it when we worked together in 2015. I've actually worked at 3 companies of the same companies as Piper, and we just became friends through that time. And he told me about Ethereum. I've been working in web startups here in Colorado for the last 10 years or so, and basically have led engineering teams a lot through that time. I actually got my start in startups in 2008. I was the CTO of an online dating website, which is just like such a funny way to get into startups, running an online dating website. It's the ultimate combination of social stuff and computer nerdery to work on in my 20s. But yeah, I led engineering teams, and we always relied on open source but never gave back. And I came to learn that supporting open source software was a real problem in terms of how it's funded and how it's put out there. There's just a lot of burnout among maintainers. And so when I started playing with Ethereum in 2015, 2016, 2017, when Piper told me about it, I kind of had this idea that, well, maybe if we have an open source financial system, we could actually build business models for open source. And that was the genesis of Gitcoin's mission. And I started Gitcoin in 2017 in my basement, took some of the money I made in the bull market, invested in building a brand and building a website for what was then a bounty platform. So the idea is that if you do X task, then you can get Y tokens in exchange for doing that. And at that time, I couldn't go to a hackathon without tripping over someone else who was combining open source and crypto economics to incentivize developers. But we persisted and we built more things around the use case of supporting open source. I guess Gitcoin Grants is the most famous one that we've done since then. And it's always been trying to stay true to that mission of growing and sustaining open source and making sure that software developers become economically empowered. So that's kind of how I got into Ethereum and how my background and sort of Piper's enthusiasm for Ethereum all mixed together to create Ethereum, or to create Gitcoin. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that it's super hard to break into this space. I basically interviewed with 3 teams at Consensus, and they all rejected me / didn't return my calls until I finally found a way to get in front of Joe and got him to fund Gitcoin. And it was just super frustrating to try to compete against everyone else who was trying to get into the space in 2017. And I'm just super thankful to the person who put me in front of Joe and got Gitcoin funded by one of the best funders in the space. And I think we wouldn't be where we are now without Joe. Joe definitely took Gitcoin from just me and my friends in Colorado using Gitcoin to the Ethereum Foundation using Gitcoin, which is a huge increase in legitimacy. So yeah, I don't know where you want to go with that, but I guess let me know which thread you want to pull on.
Yeah. Well, being kind of a product dev.
Oh, weird. I can't hear you. I don't know if it's just
can you hear me now?
It might just be you, Kevin.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Okay. So you were coming through all scrambled. I don't know how much of what I said came through.
No, yours came through, I think.
Yeah, you're great.
Okay, cool.
Well, I kind of like thinking about when you first are starting a product, and so you had history starting some startups before. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard, right? And like trying to get users and trying to pitch your idea and all that stuff. Like, did it take a while? Like, was it not until Consensus got involved that it was able to really take off, or were you getting some good traction right up front, or
Right.
like, how dedicated did you have to be, like, compared to having a startup that maybe didn't do so well in the past, knowing
Yeah.
how that goes? And then was Gitcoin just like instant success, or?
I mean, it's just 2021, 4 years later, and I still like someone will come up to me at DevCon and be like, "Congrats on Gitcoin, Kevin," and like, and I still think like, "Oh fuck!" Like they don't know how much money we're spending right now. Like we're still not profitable. So like I still have that imposter syndrome where I think that it's, uh, like we haven't made it until we're financially viable is a big question, is a big problem for me. But Gitcoin's a double-sided marketplace that connects developers to the people who want to fund them and people who want access to developers. And marketplaces have this network effect to them where you have to get them off the ground by solving that chicken and the egg problem where the developers won't come until the funders come, and the funders won't come until the developers come. And so it's really just pushing a boulder uphill in order to get that network effect rolling. That was the first couple of years. Not all startups are like that. There's some startups where you come for the tool and you stay for the network and you get insane growth just because you're providing a lot of value with the tool. Gitcoin is not that. It's a marketplace and it's subject to that network effect where every developer that joins Gitcoin makes it better for every funder who's on Gitcoin, and every funder who joins Gitcoin makes it better for every developer on Gitcoin. So it's really about that network effect, and it's been backbreaking work getting it, like surviving the bear market and like getting it off the ground. So I don't know what I would do if I couldn't code. Like I just did a lot of the shit myself. Like I can't imagine, like hiring a development team that you don't have high trust with in order to get a marketplace off the ground. Like I don't know what I would do if I couldn't just code and do a lot of it myself.
Yeah, well, and the open source tie in there is important too, and like I think what we see with open source communities, really, a project becomes a community. You have like the core devs, and then you have some collaborators kind of on the fringes, and then you have all the people using it and stuff, and like focusing. And that's kind of like what we were thinking in DAOhaus. It's like products are communities. It's like that's like the first thing, and kind of from a meta cartel standpoint, it's like the community is the thing.
I love metacartel, by the way. Like there's a counterfactual world where I couldn't get Joe to fund Gitcoin, and I would just be like deep in the metacartel community right now, and I kind of wish I was already. But yeah, I mean, so one thing is when I started Gitcoin in 2017, everyone was launching ICOs, and there was this myth that like if you took a human and you put in a token, then you would get out an action, which is just like in hindsight so extremely dumb. And I really think that humans are more intrinsically motivated and motivated by deeply connecting with each other more than they are by tokens. And so we made a counter trend bet by just focusing on product and community when we started Gitcoin, not doing a token. Gitcoin to this day still does not have a token. And I think Metacartel did that also, and just like really focused on the people and making them feel welcome. And that's such a key part of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there wasn't more to that insight than that, but I see that a lot.
I think we're all
but yeah. So speaking of community, I think the reason why we scheduled this was because of this idea of a squad wealth DAO. So basically, what if I'm going to pick on the 4 people who have video on right now. What if Deacon Bro, Owocki, the Kerp, and Van Gist all were creating startups, and we wanted to de-risk each of our, like, startups are basically a 1 in 10 shot, right? So what if we could all take a portion of our equity and roll it together in an instrument where we could all have upside in each other's projects? What kind of incentives would that create for developers to have a little bit more diversified upside? Investors get that upside because investors invest in multiple projects, but founders don't get that kind of diversification. And so I think it's a really awesome idea to pair with that community where you've already got high trust to allow people to get upside in each other's projects.
Yeah, and the other kind of secondary thing there is that now everyone is in a pool together, so they're like they're motivated to help each other succeed. You tie together their incentives. So it's, you may just go in because you're like, well, one of us four is gonna have success. So
Yeah.
let's like hedge my bets a little bit. But really, it's like, hey, why not make all four of us have success? And we're all in the pool together. We all put like 1% of our equity into this pool, and we're like gonna work together.
So I got my start in startups going through Techstars, and 2 of the companies in my 10-person cohort exited. And mine, I ran for 5 years from the ages of 22 to 27, and then it imploded. And so, I would have fared much better if I had gotten equity in the cohort going through that.
Totally.
Sorry, Kirp, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I mean but it's a perfect example also of how to, build in intrinsic mechanisms that will cause people to diversify what they're able to work on more in terms of, like you see a lot of startups where it's sort of like, well, we could use this third-party service to solve a problem that we have, or we could build our own, and we need to have a conversation as a team about whether building our own is the right way to go, because down the road that other product becomes competition if we both support one another on the way up. And because you don't have the intrinsic incentive of like the co-ownership model, there's just so much collaboration that could happen that doesn't. And I'm familiar with it from the startup world as well, where it's sort of like, I ran a legal tech startup for 4 years, and there's 10 different companies all trying to solve the same document automation problem, but it's all because everyone's baseline thing is like, we need to ingest a PDF, we need to fill it out. And everybody goes, okay, well, but we got to build our own version though, because if we work with these other people and they build the version, then they're going to sell that to the limited number of giant law firms that will pay you a sustainable amount of money for it. And, and so like, it's a problem with just trying to solve tech problems, because there's 100 solutions for 2 problems, and they're all competing, and only 2 of those companies get to win. And then, we could have been using all that brain power to like solve the next bigger problem that humanity has, as we're trying to, not fry our planet, for example.
It's like this cliche thing that like everyone's starting photo sharing apps with there's giant existential humanistic problems that just aren't VC fundable. Like climate change, I think is like a really great example of a public goods problem that exists. I think climate change and privacy and open source software are like my top 3 trifecta of public goods problems that I'd like to see crypto solve. And I have this deep not deep theory, but like I have this sort of like existential angst about those public goods problems, and I really hope that with the stateful internet we can coordinate around solving public goods problems, and it just opens up the design space for what you can do with your tech skills by so much. So maybe a little bit hopeful, but I got kids. Like I want to make sure that the earth isn't like scorched by the time they're my age. I think that's super important to have that continuity of diversity and well-being on for life on planet Earth.
Yeah, or they could move to Mars, maybe.
Yeah, seems like a dystopian nightmare to me, but
At least it's outside the box thinking, and not just another $100 million raise for another photo sharing app, which I was literally complaining to somebody about this morning, because that just happened. And it was like, oh, a celebrity wants to build a photo sharing app. That's great. They could be working on carbon capture, but they're not. They're going to try to take on Instagram. Great. Awesome.
A meme kind of pitched a photo sharing app on our last talk.
In a sense.
But it was a meme style, so probably won't even talk about it right now because.
But yeah, I do like the kind of like emergent properties that can emerge from that kind of squad wealth idea in general. Like we've totally talked about that in the metacartel also. Like there's a lot of projects that have spun out of the metacartel where a lot of trusted teams we've worked and just like contributed in a community first manner for so long together that it's a no-brainer for us, but that's I like your point, Kurt. That's a really interesting point in how that like I think one shift that's happening is like startups in general are trained to like be killers, to like grow and destroy everything else around them. Whereas if you have like these kind of like pools where teams are not necessarily having to work together, but they're like sharing upside and things together, then you can get to a place where you're like collaborating in a composable manner. So you're like, my team is building this piece of the block and we're focused on this, and it's like whatever. You guys are like building this piece of the block and it's focused on this thing, but we can put those things together to do more things together, so I think it just like kind of allows for another angle for like positive some value creation.
Right.
I mean, there's so many different things, but I am really excited about that potential in that for sure.
Well,
yeah.
The reality of doing it via something like Squad Wealth DAO would be, the idea of mutually beneficial partnerships is a nice idea, but the cleanest possible thing would be like you just have to tie the financial incentives together, or else in a capitalist world, or else it just doesn't happen the way we want it to, right? I mean, there's VC firms out there that say, oh, we're partners and not blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but you've also literally invested in two different companies in the same sector because you're placing two bets and you don't want us to cooperate. You want us to compete even within your portfolio. So like, I don't know, there's that aspect if we say, well, what if we could just tie the reputation systems together? And it's like, no, just straight up in a capitalist world, if we don't tie the equity piece together, it doesn't
work. Well, and there's I think there's a social aspect to it though, like
For
social pressures and social like reputation can be like really important for a startup when they're just getting started. You don't want to, I don't know, like do you want to be seen as like the cutthroat, smash all the competition, or the collaborator to like work with everyone? Then do users care? Maybe not.
Well, I think it's ultimately
I guess if they hold your token, they want you to
yeah, well, so I was just going to say, I mean, that's the cool thing about tokenization not just the ICO like token in work out piece that Ken was talking about, but like, with a token, you can start to do the sort of novel aspects of it's part equity, part, equity-esque instrument, and then part reputation. The instrument can become novel compared to what we have now, which is either like cash payment or ownership. It's like, you can have this weird spectrum of different devices, right? Which is what gets us to Squad Wealth DAO. Like even just using a DAO for that is a novel way of thinking about how you would do that, compared to just like, what are we gonna have, a clusterfuck of contracts to share the ownership of these companies? Like, it's just practically difficult to manage.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm really interested to see once we get reputation into systems what we can do with that, because my whole thing is that I want communities to be governed by the people that they're in, and not some outside investor or like party who's going to be extractive from them. And like the whole design space of basically this internet of value and basically having financial instruments that serve the communities that they're involved in, to me just feels like a closed circle. Like the incentives can be more aligned than they were in the traditional cap system, which has consolidated so much due to its Matthew effect that now you have to be a certain amount of rich to even have a stake in the future, which to me is just this self-perpetuating thing that's going to cause it to continue to consolidate. And so I'm really super passionate about uniting the incentives of capital and labor. Like in the 20th century, we had labor unions that would basically like unite against management and protect the workers. And like, I don't think that unions are ascendant today. And I hope I'm not getting too political for anyone on this call, but I support labor having rights. And I think the mechanism through which we like allow labor to have a good quality of life is going to be different in the internet in the information age as it was in the industrial age. And just allowing labor to be the capital is maybe one of the ways that could happen. So
I don't know. It's a whole design space that we're exploring, but I think equity is probably the first thing that we can do there.
Yeah.
And in Raid Guild, we're kind of exploring that because Raid Guild isn't really a union at all, but we still having like a bunch of people that are doing the same thing together. Just you get that community backing, right? Like we've had clients misbehaving and things like that, and instead of when you're a lone wolf kind of freelance contractor ending up like, okay, is it worth it for me to even talk to these guys for 5K or whatever? They have the weight of the entire community just to be like, hey dudes, like this isn't cool, like let's find a compromise here. Where is it? There, we've got 100 other devs in the space that are kind of like got each other's back on this and would maybe not work for you anymore if you don't like resolve this correctly. So there's some like weight there, although not like formally. We're not like having picket lines and stuff, but
well, it's interesting why unions are even like necessitated, right? Because like unions are necessitated because workers don't have any rights, and they have to like organize together in order to make their voice actually heard. Basically, it's the only way that they can actually get a voice anywhere is they have to like combine together to like get a louder voice to battle that power that is above them. Whereas like in something like the Raid Guild, it's not a union, but it just like it's not necessitated because the whole thing is a union. Basically, there is no power above to fight in a way. So like yeah.
In a sense, it's still a support group, though. Yeah, I mean, the fact of the idea of the power dynamics, right? Like some of that also just comes down to like it's uncomfortable to speak truth to power, or to have a client sitting there going, well, I'll pay you this, I'll pay you a quarter of what you asked for, and you're sitting there going, well, I could have that money in hand. It's like people don't like confrontation. I do more than most, so I'm an outlier. But it's become part of my function with regard to the guild is to frequently find myself in situations where I have to say, no, that's bullshit. That's not how this works. Like you're deliberately trying to undercut this creative whose work is worth more than you're saying. And that's not how the guild works. So if you don't want to pay that, then get lost. And like, I feel more comfortable doing that because I know I'm doing it in the name of this sort of institution with a manifesto and a group of beliefs and stuff like that, which, I'd probably be less likely to stand up that way if it were just me. Instead, I would probably just ghost whoever that was being shitty to me. But
right.
So in that way it becomes powerful because there starts to be that narrative of, well, this group has, X quality standard, and if you're not willing to meet it, then you just don't get to play in their sandbox, and that becomes its own power, sort of, even if it's not just about like collective action against, managerial sort of abuses or whatever. Like I think when people think of unions, they think of, picketing for higher wages at the auto plant or whatever. And there's definitely more to it. Than that.
And I think,
Yeah,
well,
sure.
and, like, our kind of take on DAOs are more like smaller, like the long tail of all the people that want to be in communities that are, less than a couple hundred people. So like a union can get so big that it switches, right? And maybe that's not good. I don't know, like even as a worker, if like that's something that you want to be a part of. But I like that more bottom up, where it's like, cool, we have a community of 100 people, but maybe we should have two communities of 50 people or something, instead of maybe we should have a community of 5,000 people or 5 million,
Well, and so that sort of gets us to the idea of the ultimately squad wealth DAO, or if you take sort of a philosophical step a little bit higher than that, which gets us to the sort of self-serving, let's talk about what DAOhaus is doing things. But like, traditionally a labor union gets to be the size that it is because, it's about coordination difficulties, right? Like the idea of having 50 different unions for different types of trades, but that have all committed to be sort of working together. It's just it's like a very difficult thing to do practically if you're just talking about monthly meetings and phone trees and, like typewritten letters and stuff like that. And so instead you end up with the truck drivers union, instead of like the sort of granular subsets of that skill set that you might have otherwise, right? And so I think that kind of gets us to the idea of I think it's probably the first time we're talking about it publicly, so it's exciting, but we'll also have a blog post coming out about it soon. But sort of the idea of like meta governance and what does it look like to have a DAO made up of DAOs, which is kind of the question of, it's similar to the question of Squad Wealth DAO. What does it look like to have this sort of communal governance layer on top of all of these different projects? And I think the end exploration that we aim to take on is, can you have 50 DAOs of 50 people, but that all still have this united layer sort of living over top of them, and what does that look like? Is the place to start that just to kind of do the pitch for Uberhaus?
Yeah. And also, Kevin, I don't know how long you had on the schedule. We could usually continue on for the hour, but if you needed to drop at 12:30, then that's...
Oh, you're muted, Kevin.
You're muted.
Oh, weird. Oh, I think I was maybe leaking audio and someone muted me. Okay. Yeah, I could do the hour. I can hang out. And by the way, cool name, Uberhaus. I like it.
Sweet. Yeah, perfect. So I think, do the sort of people with a better understanding of Uberhaus than I have want to run through it real quick, and then, I'm still.
Well, I think initially it's just
Kevin thinks.
Initially, it's just kind of another experiment in the space, right? It's like, we'll probably use it as really just like a way to kind of unite a bunch of different DAOs underneath governing basically our product and how it's developed. I mean, they're the users of our product, so they can have some say through a DAO of how the money is spent in our treasury and how what features we build and things like that. I think we just start simple, and so we're basically all the DAOs in our community of DAOs will be getting a way to participate in this Uberhaus DAO. Totally optional. They can or if they don't want to, that's fine too. But it's just another experiment, like a lot of times, like we sit around and we talk in the crypto space, we sit around and talk about things a lot. And even in the startup world, it's always like, oh, well, we got to get all these metrics first. But sometimes, and this is more my dev side, just do it. And Leroy Jenkins into it and see what happens,
Yeah, I think the part of the conversation around Uberhaus that I'm familiar with was ultimately when we started to take a look at the idea of, a lot of these protocols get to the level of, well, to take a step back, I mean, our obsession has always been progressive decentralization, and any of these products that get to a level of, okay, it's time to diffuse another layer, it's time to decentralize further, they end up with a governance token, and it's just sort of this thing of like, okay, well, what does that mean even for, and everything is just an experiment in what does governance even mean. But the thing I remember talking about early on was, does it make sense to be giving individuals the power to govern a protocol that's meant to be a platform for DAOs? And that's kind of how we got where we are now, which is to say the voting power about what should, it's funny because what it really sort of breaks down to is kind of like just federated. It's kind of like having a federal system of states. But ultimately, the DAOs are the ones that should decide, and they can make the decisions however they want, and then bring that decision to the collective Uber DAO, and then that makes sense to me for the way that the decision gets made about how this platform for DAOs is, it operates, and I think ends up with, ideally a more egalitarian platform, because you're not going to have the same attack vectors of like, well, let's go coordinate a bunch of people in a Telegram channel to do some bullshit pump and dump based on the fact that we all have governance tokens and don't really care about this platform. Well, it's going to be a little harder to do if we've federated that control out to the entities that we think actually matter within the platform, which is the communities and not necessarily the individuals that build the communities.
It'll be interesting because governance is one of those things that most people find really dull. They don't want to do it. We happen to be all DAO nerds, so it's like what we think about all the time. But it'll be interesting to see if people participate, what kind of like, there's going to be a lot of different opinions on things and stuff. So we'll see how that goes. Like, there could be a lot that emerges out of that as well, like on distribution of voting power and who knows,
Well, I think the squad wealth part of it is the real experiment is to see if that grows into, DAOs that come in and say, well, we want this boost to exist and we're all united in the prosperity of this platform. So we're just going to build it and everyone can use it, instead of saying we're going to build it and monetize it. And, you kind of have like that Facebook problem where it's like, Zynga building games on Facebook, like, it just turns into a platform for other people to pitch ways to make money. And eventually it devolves into, just the same stuff we were talking about, right? Like dependency on the platform, but then ultimately this competition where, if we can all align incentives to build better coordination software, maybe we really can build a platform for, taking on these things and not wasting effort competing with one another as we try to not melt the planet and things like that. So,
Did that make sense to you, Kevin, at all? That was like a bunch of around the,
Yeah, that was it.
So, sorry, what was the question?
Did that make sense to you, the Uber House thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing. I like that you framed it as an experiment. It's good to be iterative with these things, and I'm sort of keen to see what comes out of the first iteration of it. When is it launching?
In the next couple of weeks.
Nice.
Another aspect of it, which is more that squad wealth kind of thing, is that we've seen people use our DAOs in different ways. Sometimes it's more social clubs or like guilds, like Raid Guild. Some people use them as a way to get contribution, like funds from their community to continue building. So that part of it, where people are using like a DAO to bootstrap an idea from, potentially like a hackathon, and they win a hackathon, and it's like, okay, but we want to continue building this product next. It's like, okay, well, let's start a DAO. Let's try to bootstrap some funds into it. Now we have our governance or equity token or whatever you want to call it, and so that's where like a pool of all the different DAOs that are doing that kind of angle could start. You drop 1% of your equity in, and you get some amount of shares out, and just like the basic Moloch DAO primitive of that, you put funds in, you get shares weighted to how much funds you put in. You can rage quit at any time, but the difference would be you put in your funds, your 1%. When you rage quit, you're actually taking 10% of the 10 other projects that are also in there. But you don't get any future projects that are also jumping in.
It kind of gets into interesting conversations about how do you price people's labor and the upside of each project, which are very uncomfortable at the early stages before anything really has value.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how you're handling the specifics of that.
So, in this market, it's hard to get like good price discovery, because it's like all you have to do is put up a PDF and someone's going to give you 100K or something. And so you
missed the bear market already. Yeah.
So people can evaluate or give themselves, like $1,000 per share or whatever, and then they actually get some people to give them money, so they've kind of validated that idea. But yeah, I mean, that is a really hard problem without like a real open market to decide the prices. But it's also, I mean, everyone's dealing with the bull market. so I don't know. It's a good point. Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's like the pure sort of market-driven mechanism, which assumes that there's no regulation around who can own what types of tokens, and also maybe assumes that gas fees are low, but you could just let the market price it. But that's sort of like weird and futuristic. One point I was going to make is that I'd be curious to see how an experiment like DAOhaus ebbs and flows as we go from fear to greed and back again. I mean, I think crypto moves in 3 to 5 year cycles, and we're in this really great place where if you're a software engineer or someone who's talented and has these skills, then you can basically choose where you want to work. And so I forget who on the call was saying that they told people who are abusing their creatives to F off. You can do that when capital is cheap, but when capital, there you go. When capital is not cheap, then it shifts the power balance between the two. So I'll be curious how this evolves through the next market cycle.
That's how I got so good at it in this cycle, because I did it anyway when it was even harder.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
That's so true. And I think that even because Raid Guild started in the middle of the bear market, and it was like everyone wanted to join, but now it's like everyone already has a job, or like they can really choose what they want to do right now. So it's like
I thought the funniest thing I found in 2017-ish, I was just starting the startup, and we were looking for blockchain devs for some purpose, and it was really weird trying to find somebody with 3 years experience, because at that point they also had a shitload of money. They were kind of like, I don't need a job, I just work on what I want, because I got ETH when it was $1. That was a funny phenomenon. But I mean, ultimately that's sort of the beginning of the alpha leak-ish part of that conversation, which is we're doing it. And that's how we're going to ultimately handle governance within DAOhaus. So
very cool.
We'll kind of see how that plays out. Are there any of the other sort of technicalities of that worth talking about yet?
Well, I was wondering,
delegation, any of that kind of stuff that we've sort of, I know we've been, it's like throwing noodles to see what sticks, basically. But we've had to solve a bunch of stuff to make it even workable in our own mental models. So we could talk about it.
The coordination across like these on-chain DAOs that require a quorum, or like Moloch, which requires a voting period. It can get complex really quick. The nice thing about Moloch is it also has it's a permission kind of DAO, so you can you can vote someone in, but you can also vote someone out. So what that allows is to like kind of assign roles where you could choose. You could either have like a group decision, a vote in your DAO that then bubbles up to another DAO, but you got to align the voting periods, because the other DAO might have a voting period of 1 week and your DAO has a voting period of 2 weeks. So then things get messed up. Or you can just assign a delegate or a role of someone that can represent the DAO. If they don't represent you how the DAO is like asked, then they can be kicked out of the DAO.
Or just their delegation removed, I guess. But yeah. Kicking sounds extreme, but it could be viable.
One of the kind of inspirations for this kind of model was from Aaron Schwartz, and he was talking about like a governance system which you can have 50 people, like just say everyone on your block, are all in this local community making decisions on things that are really affecting them. Then you could have another community of the 50 blocks around you are all their own communities, but then they're voting on how that larger city block or whatever votes, and then it can keep going up. And the way he puts it, because of math, once you get to
5 layers, I think.
Or yeah, it wasn't a lot. It was like less. It was like 20 or 30 layers. You have 300 million people that are represented through the system. Yeah, so it's like flips it upside down, in a way where you can really get the things that matter is the things that you vote on, and that's really what people want. Like national governance is, you end up with like the system we have now.
Right. Well, and I think the coolest part of it for me, as the kind of nerd that takes part in Federalist paper reading clubs, like book clubs, like the just that additional dynamic you just described, like the introduction of that gets us to the emergent problems and ultimately, I hope, emergent solutions that we need to escalate to functional forms of like national governance, like you were just saying. Like imagine a version of our existing system where you could more easily kick your your state representatives, like based on math and not based on sort of this bullshit system where the gerrymandering means McConnell's always in power even though his own state doesn't like him. Like,
and you could sit in a Discord chat with everyone in your group, and you can actually talk to them and be like, this is the problem. There's a pothole in front of my street.
Yeah.
There's a big smokestack over here, and it's bugging me, or whatever.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Otherwise, that's kind of that's the house party, guys. Thanks for joining, Kevin, and thanks for the tweet that kind of kicked off the whole thing. Anything left to plug or promote or anything like that before we start to wrap it up?
Yeah, sure.
Oh man, I wish I had something to plug. What should I plug? Public goods. Support your local public goods.
Yeah,
That says when GR9.
Yeah, when's the next grant?
March 10th.
March 10th.
We're going to be, so the theme of grants round 9 is going to be simplify and unify. We've built a lot of shit over the last little while, and we're just going to try to like button it all up and clean up the interface and hopefully scale up. We've been growing 20% every Gitcoin grants round, and last round was $1 million. So if it's bull market, so let's see if we could do 1.2 or 1.3 this time around. But to actually directly answer your question, March 10th will be the start of the grants round. So see you all there.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I'll take this opportunity to say thank you for that. It's been a huge driver of good in the space. So.
Since we have a couple minutes left, there's one thing I wanted to kind of ask. This came up in our Raid Guild meeting earlier today. Is like DAOs wanted a way, like as a DAO, we want a way to be able to create bounties to engage like the people that aren't like directly members, or to engage like apprentices that are learning from Web 2 to Web 3, things like that. It would be a cool like boost, or what we call in DAOhaus, like a plugin that would allow a DAO to be like, cool, we want to take 10% of our funds and put it into a Gitcoin grant or into multiple Gitcoin grants and have them be more open, like outside of members, where we can engage people.
Right. Yeah. I think the idea of sort of DAOs doing that is really interesting conceptually. I just want to like come clean to everyone. I feel like I have to do this every once in a while in the Ethereum space. Like Gitcoin is hella centralized. Like we just focused on building something that people could use in the start. And like for that reason, like we don't have a smart contract that you can just call in order to create like a grant or a matching pool. Like it's all on a database on our servers. And eventually we want to progressively decentralize, but we're just not there yet. And so if you're a DAO looking for a programmatic way to create a grant, I'm sorry, I can't help you yet. But, if you're willing to have one of your members create that grant and set it up and manage it there, then it's something that we can help with now. And over time, we'll progressively decentralize to make it completely trustless, but we're just not there yet. And I have to come clean and just tell you that.
Yeah.
The fact that you do, though, and that that you're not in that decentralized state is ultimately
Yeah.
what matters to me. Because
Well,
it's way
I'd
worse
say
to
you
find
guys
out
are-
after the fact. You know, you're talking to somebody and then it's like a gotcha piece comes out on CoinDesk about how you're not decentralized, and it's like the whole time you were
Right.
saying you were. Like, that's
Well,
the fuckery.
And what we've learned from endless crypto Twitter debates is that people are going to call you centralized even if you're not, based off of what's in their bags. So I don't know.
35 people show up to your community meetings.
Yeah. And so like one of the things I've been trying to do is we just posted this governance blog post that was like all of the actions the Gitcoin team took against spammers on the platform in that quarter. And it's funny because like I did that to be transparent so that like you guys would know I wasn't being evil. But like no one read the post. I don't know if anyone ever really cared. But so I don't know. We're trying to figure out how to progressively decentralize and make sure it's transparent in the meantime. But that's kind of where we're at. In terms of a DAO posting a grant, yeah, send me an email. Let me know what you want to do, and would love to get it hooked up. And we'll be as transparent as possible until we finally get to that point where it is a smart contract and you don't have to trust Kevin or anything like that.
Yeah, that's totally. I mean, it's progressive decentralization, right? We have to have that wedge, and same with our platform. We use AWS for some stuff. You know, we have some
Get him. He's centralized. Get him. I love AWS. Compute as a service. 20 years ago, I would have had to go rack some servers
Right.
and like build them from scratch, and now we have AWS.
I feel you. I got a startup that tanked because we couldn't get a bank to let us accept credit cards, and that was like 2010. Stripe didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
It's
Man,
crazy how
it's
people have
funny,
become
yeah.
so comfortable with credit cards online, you know, and really it used to be just as bad as like, you know, the fear you get when you hit that MetaMask approve button. You know?
Well, awesome, everybody. Thanks a lot. Thanks for hanging out for another house party.
Thanks
And
so much for having me.
joining us, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. That's great.
Thanks for calling.
Bye, y'all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Stream's done.